Hi, welcome back to Swarzo History. This is episode 3, and it's about the second song on Odyssey, The Sacrifice. And I realize now making a video that I never state in the song that the song is actually about the Battle of Thermopylae. So, the Battle of Thermopylae is 300, and you already know what I'm talking about. So, the popular narrative of events is King Leonidas leads 300 Spartans in a kind of suicide mission against the incoming Persian Empire led by King Xerxes, and holds them off for a little while, and then they get annihilated, and it buys Greece enough time to prepare for the invasion and eventually turn back the Persian Empire and win. And that's kind of true. I mean, it is an epic story and it's a real event, but of course, as usual, the historical reality is a little bit different than what you see in the movies. So our primary source for Thermopylae is Herodotus, who includes the Battle of Thermopylae in Book 7. So, in the movie 300 and the popular narrative, it's, a small 300 Spartans and a few other allied Greeks against millions of Persians. And that's kind of what Herodotus says as well, but he gives a lot more detail and nuance. So he does indeed say that the Persian infantry was 1,700,000 men plus 80,000 cavalry, not counting European recruits that Xerxes picked up on the way. So that seems unrealistic, but as with most historical sources like Herodotus, the purpose in giving that number is to say it was a lot. And on the Greek side, you have the 300 Spartans because that was a customary kind of expeditionary force for the Spartan military. And then in addition to them, you had 500 men from Tegea, 500 from Mantinea, over 1,000 from Arcadia, 400 from Corinth, 200 from Philios, 80 from Mycenae, 700 from 700 Thespians and 400 Thebans, plus more men from Locrian and Phocia, and all of these forces were supposed to be advanced guards, because the Greeks at the time didn't expect the battle to happen so quickly. They planned to finish celebrating the Carnea, the Olympic festival, and then send out larger forces when they were done. So, small force, yes, but a lot more than just the 300 Spartans and a couple of friends. So, Xerxes, with his vastly numerically superior force, shows up to Thermopylae, sees the Spartans, or his scouts see the Spartans and report about it. And Xerxes assumes that once reality settles in, that they're so hopelessly outnumbered that there's nothing they can do to win, that the Greek force will just turn and leave. So Xerxes and the rest of the Persian military actually just waits for a few days to see if that happens. And then when nobody runs away, and Xerxes doesn't believe his advisors that the Spartans aren't just going to leave, he gets pissed off and starts attacking, and that's why the battle starts when it does. And kind of true to the movie as well, the Greeks were way more effective fighters, according to Herodotus, than the Persians were. Greeks had their hoplites with their armor and longer spears. They were also fighting in the narrow space at Thermopylae, which made the Persian numbers less significant. And the Greeks really got a lot of practice fighting each other before this to be really good at fighting. Their technology and their tactics were very much based on fighting each other, heavily armored opponents in phalanxes, and the Persians couldn't really stack up to that in a one-on-one fight. And the Greeks also formed their units into ethnic units, nationality, city units. So the Spartans would take their turn fighting. When they got tired, they would send another contingent out to be the fighting force, the frontline fighting force for a while, and they would rotate. So it seemed like a never-ending fight because Xerxes was banking on the Greeks just getting too tired to keep going, but they had a system in place that worked, so they didn't get too tired to keep going. But of course, there's the secret goat path around the pass that gets revealed to the Persians by Ephialtes, which for some reason in the movie 300 is depicted as this weird, deformed hunchback man. And the Phocaeans who were guarding the pass ended up retreating when the Persians came up the path because they thought the Persians were going to fight to the death there, so the Phocaeans left and kind of formed a defensive position, and the Persians just went on by to surround the main Greek force at the gates. And when the Greeks found out that they were being surrounded, there was this debate about what was going to happen. In the movie 300, you get kind of Leonidas as this weird fanatic saying, "We're going to fight to the death," and then all the other Greek contingents are like, "This is a little bit insane," and they leave. Herodotus says one of two things happened. Either, as reality set in, most of the Greek contingents realized this is not a good idea, this is a suicide mission, and they started to trickle away before it was too late and they got cut off. But he gives another option, which he himself says he believes more, which is that Leonidas ordered or allowed most of the other Greek contingents to leave, but he stayed and kept his force there because he thought it would be dishonorable to leave the place he was ordered to go. And also, Herodotus says that there was an oracle that said either Sparta would be conquered or their king would die, and that Leonidas probably interpreted that to mean that he was supposed to die at Thermopylae to prevent Sparta from falling, so it was a sacrifice. In any case, he stayed. Most of the Greeks left, but Leonidas kept the Thebans there as kind of hostages because he suspected them of collaborating with the Persians. And the Thespians also decided of their own accord to stick it out with the Spartans. And this was truly the suicide mission, and this is where everybody dies, except for some of the Thebans, because Leonidas dies, and then the Thebans kind of desert to the Persians to surrender, according to Herodotus. Some of them die, but some of them get taken prisoner. But everyone else, there's fierce fighting over Leonidas's body. After he dies, there's a last-ditch defensive effort around a certain point, but according to Herodotus, everyone knew and expected that this was a last stand. They weren't going to live. So it was a very fierce fight when the Persians finally surrounded them. And eventually everyone dies. But there have been songs about this battle. Most notably, Sabaton did a song. I think they just called it Sparta, if I remember correctly. And then more recently, War Kings also made a song called Sparta about this. Both are very good, and you should go listen to them. So, mine, because like I said in the last episode with Diomedes, with that being propaganda, I wanted the sacrifice to kind of be about a young Spartan guy saying that he's gonna go off to hold Thermopylae against this huge Persian invasion to defend Greece and earn glory. And then in the middle of the song, reality starts to set in that the Persian army is huge and it's going to be a tough fight. And then at the end of the song, realizing we're cut off, we're surrounded, we're all going to die, but they're going to choose to die on their terms, in a way that's honorable and that they see as a sacrifice for Sparta and the rest of Greece. So, as most of you probably know, Sparta had a really strict honor code about the conduct of warfare. Retreating was a big no-no, surrendering was a big no-no, and there are reports in Herodotus and other sources that suggest that if someone retreated against orders and came back to Sparta, or even people that were following orders and they didn't know what was happening and they ended up going home, and people interpreted them as having deserted or retreated, they get shunned, outcast, and basically humiliated to the brink of suicide, and losing their families and loved ones who want nothing to do with them anymore. So that plays into the theme of the album as well. And in this song, I wanted it to show that the person who, like the main character of the song, is going off with this idea, fighting for glory, and then accepting the fact that it's his lot to fight and die there, and that it's the Spartan thing to do. So the next song that I'll be talking about next week will be Victory, which is super optimistic and a very nice high note on the album. So I'll see you then when we talk about Victory.